Note, this video is connected to a research report. I will not say everything that's in the research report in this video, so if you want to see the whole thing, read it. The link is in the description. This video is just summary. The Electoral College is whack. If you've ever lived in America, or paid attention to the presidential election in America, you've probably heard about the Electoral College. But just in case you haven't, I'll give you a brief rundown of the basics. The Electoral College is the process by which the President of America is elected. Instead of going by popular vote like a normal democracy, the President is determined by electoral votes. So the process for voting isn't, as most people would assume, citizens voting for President, but instead citizens voting for electors, and the electors voting for President, with the winner-take-all system in most states. Electoral votes are spread throughout the state loosely based on populations. In actuality, the number of votes a state gets is equal to the number of representatives they have in the House, plus the number of senators they have, which is always 2, and the number of representatives is based on population. The additional 2 votes for each state means that the balance of votes is very skewed. Let's take a look at California and Wyoming, the 2 extremes, as an example. California has 53 representatives in the House, so adding 2 votes because of the senators barely changes anything, whereas Wyoming has 1 rep, meaning that adding 2 votes because of the senators triples the voting power of Wyoming. This means that if we convert citizens' votes to electoral votes, someone's vote in Wyoming is worth about 4 times as much as that same person's vote would have been worth had they been in California, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The Electoral College has 438 votes, 335 representatives in the House, 100 senators, and 3 more votes for Washington. To win the election, you must get at least 270 votes. I'm not going to go into what happens if nobody gets at least 270 votes because it's rather complicated, but there are follow-up steps in that case. So that's the basics of the Electoral College, and if you're wondering how many votes each state has, here you go. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the point of this video, why the Electoral College is awful. Whoa, that's a lot. I think I'll just focus on these 2 for the purposes of this video. First, it's undemocratic. I mentioned this earlier, but here's some more detail. Because the minimum number of votes per state is 3, the population to electoral vote ratio is wildly different in different states. As I said earlier, in places like Wyoming, the ratio of population to electoral votes is much lower than in the more populous places like California. This leads to people living in smaller states having their votes be worth significantly more than those of people living in bigger states. I don't think I have to spell out why that's undemocratic, so let's just move on to the other point. It disincentivizes voters. Now, that last point was pretty simple and you likely already heard about it. This one's a little less known, so perhaps an even bigger issue with the Electoral College, so let's talk about it. Say you're living in State A, and about 90% of people living in State A pretty much always vote for the people like the current president. Election year comes around and you, being the good citizen you are, start researching and looking into the main candidates. You find that one of them, candidate A, is very similar to the current president. The other, candidate B, is very different. You decide to support candidate B. However, you know that the vast majority of your state will vote for candidate A because they're very similar to the current president, and because of the winner-take-all system, there's no reason for you to vote at all because your vote won't matter. The electoral vote just going to candidate A no matter what. Thus, the Electoral College claims another victim. In summary, the Electoral College is just plain awful, undemocratic, and it disincentivizes voters, as well as all the other issues I don't have time to mention here. Again, if you want a bit more detail and information, click the link in the description to read the full research report I did on this. And finally, I just want to mention, this video was inspired by CGP Gray's video on the same subject.